Hello, we're going to start out by reading the story to this point. It's about 13 pages long. We're going to edit along the way, as is my typical policy when starting off with the story. And I also added a new command to the chat. It's a !! story. It'll bring up a link to a Google Doc where you can read everything that was done you can read the story that was done at the end of the last stream. So it won't have the, edits that we're working on during this stream, but you can go back and read everything else before. So the reason why I want to do a whole reading and editing is, one, I'm started to read the stuff that I do so people can just listen in the background. And two, I wanted to add in the fact that Christopher is the seventh son of the seventh son, so I gotta drop some hints that he has family, brothers at least, and then actually add in the fact when the vampires are talking about Christopher and seventh son of a seventh son comes up, because I just wanted to make Christopher a bit more, I don't know, I just wanted to add to the lore of the world by saying the seventh son and the seventh son can affect a person, because it's an interesting folklore bit, and I just wanted to include it. It had nothing to do with watching The Seventh Son last month and thinking about it the other day. Nothing to do with that at all. So I'm going to take a drink of water, and then I'll start reading. Christopher, a man in his late 20s, had his book satchel slung over his shoulder as he was walking home from the library. It was late, and despite it being dinner time, the sun was already down. The street was only slightly lit up from the streetlights. He wore a deep red windbreaker to keep out the colder than usual air, the same cold air that was keeping the street empty of people. It was silent till Christopher heard sounds of a struggle down an alleyway he was passing. He stopped and peered down the alleyway. It was made up of a 4-story building on one side and a 5-story building on the other. It took a few moments for his eyes to adjust to the darkness. He could just make out that there were 3 white men in their mid-20s manhandling a black woman. 2 of them were holding the woman against the wall while the leader was talking to the woman up close. Christopher's face hardened as he realized what was happening. He quietly put down his satchel and snuck into the alleyway. He moved silently up to the group, so much so that the leader, who was about to strike the woman, was taken aback as Christopher said, "Let her go." The man slightly jumped and faced Christopher and said laughingly, "Or what?" Christopher narrowed his eyes. "Or I'll make you." The man stopped laughing and pulled out his switchblade. "Get out of here, or I'll..." Before the man could finish what he was saying, Christopher kicked him in the groin, throat punched him, did a wheel kick, and sent the man flying unconscious to the ground. He then turned his attention to the 2 men holding the woman against the wall. All 3 of them were looking at him with surprise. "Let her go." At Christopher's words, the men came out of their momentary shock. They both shoved the woman against Christopher and ran down the alleyway, away from him. Christopher caught the woman and looked into her eyes, and his face softening. "You're safe now." The woman stared into his eyes as her own eyes began to fill with water. She began to cry on his shoulder. After a few moments, they began to walk out of the alleyway with her leaning on him. Once they were back on the streets, she thanked him, and they parted ways. She walked down the street in the opposite direction he was going to go. Before continuing home, he bent over to pick up his book satchel. After straightening up, he shivered slightly. It was the oddest feeling. He looked back down the alleyway, and there was nothing there. Not even the man he knocked out. He shrugged, thinking to himself, he must have woken up and walked away. He continued his walk home. Draven looked down into the alleyway from atop a 4-story building. In the alleyway there was a struggle. 3 men were attacking a woman. They had her up against a wall. He sighed as he prepared to jump down. "Is this really the best I could find tonight?" he thought to himself. Doesn't need to be both italicized. fix that and add the quotation mark at the end. If I remember it in there. He was about to jump down as he saw a young man enter the alley. He looked several years younger than the man attacking the woman. Draven thought the young man was moving surprisingly silent towards the attackers. Draven watched as the man approached the attackers. That's too many times saying the attackers. Approached them. Within context is, yeah, fine. Draven watched the man approach them. The man in the red jacket took down one opponent in such a way that Draven was mildly impressed. He was disappointed the young man didn't give the others the same treatment. As the man began to escort the woman out of the alleyway, Draven dropped the 4 stories as silently as a feather to the alley floor. He reached down and picked up the ruffian by the neck and held him up at eye level and shook his head. Pathetic. He looked back down the alleyway as the man in the red jacket was straightening up from picking up his book satchel. Draven jumped back up where he had stood on the roof just as smoothly as he had dropped. However, this time he carried the body of the young ruffian in one hand. He watched from above as the other man looked quizzically down the alleyway before walking down the street. Draven raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Did he sense me? Draven looked back to the body in his hand, brought the body closer, opened his mouth, and sunk in his teeth into the younger man's neck. He didn't stop drinking until the body was drained of its life-giving essence. He removed his teeth from the lifeless corpse. He slightly bit the inside of his lips. Using the blood on his tongue, he licked the wounds, causing them to heal. He then dropped the body off the side of the building in an attempt to make it look like he had fallen over the edge of the building. I'm going to change it. No, he'd. I'll just leave he'd. And I'm torn to make it sound more impersonal by saying it had fallen over and, the body as being just an object. I don't know. Next time I read it, if I notice it again, I'll change it. Right now, it's fine. Draven then jumped to the next building and looked down the street for the young man with the satchel. He caught sight of him and jumped from rooftop to roof, following him. Eventually, the young man entered the 3-story townhouse. Draven spent the rest of the evening sitting on the roof and listening to the home. Eventually, the family went to bed. By the end of the evening, he learned that the boy was going to college. He also learned that the boy's name was Christopher. And this is where I'm going to add in the family part. And he had a large family of brothers. Large family. Yeah. Several boys, all of who had moved out. Alright, let's read that paragraph over again and see if I need to add anything else or change anything else. By the end of the evening, he learned that the boy was going to local college. He learned that the boy's name was Christopher and he had a large family with several boys, all of who had moved out. Tomorrow he was going to spend the day at school and meet his uncle for lunch between classes. I'm also going to add in that he lived with his parents. By the end of the evening, he learned that the boy was going to the local college and lived with his parents at home. He also learned that the boy's name was Christopher, and he had a large family with several boys, all of which who had moved. I want to say several brothers. All of which who had moved. Tomorrow he was going to spend the day at school and meet his uncle for lunch between classes. Alright, that sounds better, and I've added in that he has brothers. So it won't be a surprise later when I say he's part of such a large family. After everyone had gone to bed in the house, Draven sat on the roof a bit longer, thinking. There is something about this Christopher. He intrigues me, something about the way he fights. Then there was that moment where I was sure he could sense me. Exceedingly rare, very unexpected. Draven looked over the night scene. The lights were cluttering up the view, the buildings were breaking the wind up in unnatural patterns, and the smell of civilization clung in the air. Long sentence, almost too long, but it flows really nicely, so I'm not going to change it. It was different throughout the ages, but there was always a familiar scent when it came to civilizations. It had been a long time since he found any human even mildly interesting. He nodded as he made up his mind. I'll follow him tomorrow and see how interesting this Christopher person might be. He jumped down off the roof and walked back to his hotel. After all, he had school tomorrow. Alright, back to Christopher. It was a cool fall day. The ground was covered in golden brown fallen leaves. Despite the cool air, the sun beamed down, keeping Christopher warm with the help of his jacket, of course. Christopher was not surprised his uncle would choose to eat on the patio. He set his book satchel down next to his chair and took a seat. It wasn't long before his Uncle Oliver joined him at the table. His uncle was older than him, but he wasn't sure by how much. He always thought he looked like he was in his 20s, but he must be in his early 30s. He wasn't his real uncle, of course. He was just a family friend. He was close enough to the family that he was just always Uncle Oliver. His earliest memories of his uncle were in first grade. I'm going to add in here that Christopher started training in first grade. He was close enough to the family that he was just always Uncle. His earliest memories of his uncle were in first grade, training him in martial arts. When he started training him. Alright, so I added that little hint of his past. As his uncle sat down, Christopher greeted him. Hello, Uncle Oliver. Oliver scooted his chair towards the table as he spoke. Christopher, thanks for joining me for lunch. How was your morning at school? It was okay, Uncle. I'm not a fan of world history, though. I'm not even sure why you insisted on me taking liberal art classes. I don't like book studying. I'm more physical than that. His uncle nodded. You may not like studying, but you're good at it. I understand you don't like it, but it's necessary. Christopher slumped back in his chair and half-heartedly picked up his menu. I know you and my parents want me to do this, but it doesn't feel right. I'd rather pursue my fighting. That's the one thing I do enjoy studying. I know, and you're good at fighting, but it's not all that there is in the world. It's important to learn. I want to indicate that this is Oliver. Sighed, yeah, why not? Let's start over from the beginning. Oliver sighed. I know. And you're good at fighting, but that's not all there is in this world. It's important to learn about the past, to learn about other cultures. It gives you insight into how other people think and behave. It helps you decide on what kind of person you would like to become. You're young, you're only 18, you have a whole life ahead of you. This is only for your first term. You'll get used to the workload. Christopher put down his menu. It's not the workload, Uncle. I can cope with the extra work. I just sit in class and I don't want to be there. Oh. Puts him on edge. Oh, no, I need to change that. I just sit in class and I don't want to be there. It puts me on edge. My mind is full of developing myself to be the best fighter. I want to get into boxing. I know you don't want me to, but it's something I've always wanted to do. Oliver sighed. I know, but you have time. You're still young. We will continue your training if after college... I'm going to add in this. Tell you what. I know, but you have time. You're still young. Tell you what. We will continue your training. If after college you still want to try your hand at boxing, you can. Christopher perked up slightly. Are you serious, Uncle? What about my parents? Oliver waved off Christopher's concerns. I'll talk to your parents. They may not be happy, but they will come around. In the meantime, focus on your work. I'll take care of your parents. Just make sure you get good grades. If you don't, I will stop training. I'm going to add in you, because it sounds better. Just make sure you get good grades. If you don't, I will stop training you. Christopher was a bit surprised. He wanted his uncle to keep training him. He had been training him since the age of 10. He got a grave look on his face. Of course, Uncle. I'll do my... Look, it should be I'm just going to say a serious... The waitress approached the table smiling. Have you two decided what you'd like? And that is a question, not a statement. Christopher smiled and looked up at the waitress. Yes, I'd like a turkey club and a glass of orange juice. The waiter wrote down his order and looked over at Oliver. What about you, dear? Oliver looked up at the waitress. I'll take a water and a meatloaf with mashed potatoes. She wrote down his order and looked back up. Wonderful. I'll set them to work on it right away. She put her order book in her apron pocket and walked away. Oliver leaned forward and whispered to Christopher, like he was sharing a secret. I might even consider becoming your coach and managing you too, if you decide to go with boxing after college. Christopher was beaming. For real, Uncle? You would do that? Oliver nodded. Of course, you're my favorite nephew. I don't think you should do it, but if you do, I want to be there to support you and make sure no one takes advantage of you. Christopher began to speak. Thank you, Uncle. I really appreciate. But stopped as Oliver stood up abruptly. Oliver moved his head once from right to left, scanning the courtyard, ignoring Christopher. Christopher looked over at his uncle. I'm going to say looked up. Because his uncle is, standing up. Christopher looked up at his uncle. Is something wrong, Uncle? Oliver continued the scanning of the crowd. He had a look of concentration on his face, but as quickly as he changed back. He looked down at his nephew, and the stone look on his face fell off, and the warm smile returned. Oh, nothing is wrong. It's nothing. Thought I saw someone is all. He sat back down and changed the topic. Did you hear there was a murder near your house last night? A man named Frank Owens. No, Uncle, it didn't. His uncle nodded. It was in an alley a few minutes' walk from your house. Christopher tensed up slightly, thinking back to his fight. I did punch him in the throat. Was it too hard? Didn't he walk away? He asked his uncle, did they say how he died? Oliver shook his head. No, they didn't say how the man died, just that he was found in the alleyway dead. Christopher shifted slightly in his seat. Uncle, something happened last night. Oliver raised an eyebrow and let Christopher continue. Last night I got into a fight. He paused a moment, thinking that Oliver was going to react. He had always been taught to use his martial arts only in self-defense. To his surprise, he didn't, and Christopher... To his surprise, I don't want to say Oliver again, but I don't know, it seems to get slightly confusing because there's too many he's. I'm just going to change it to Oliver again and reread the paragraph and hear what it sounds like. Last night I got into a fight. He paused a moment, thinking Oliver was going to react. He had always been taught to use his martial arts only for self-defense. To his surprise, Oliver didn't, and Christopher continued. Yeah, that sounds better. There were these three men, and they were harassing this woman. It looked like they were about to rape her. I couldn't let them do that. I attacked the leader, and he went unconscious, and the other two ran. Let's see what his suggestion here. Rans, no. That's dumb. Ignore that. I left the man in the alley. I thought he got up and walked away, but it was dark. Maybe he was still there. Yeah, that's alright. Christopher paused. Uncle, did I kill a man? Oliver leaned in and spoke at a near whisper. He had a serious look in his eyes. I don't know, but I will find out. Don't tell anyone about this. Just go about like nothing happened. You did the right thing, no matter what. Remember that. He leaned back, concerned. The concerned look on his face disappearing. Now, let's not speak of this again. You don't have to worry. Christopher looked at his uncle suspiciously. He didn't understand why his uncle was so calm. If I killed someone, how could he take care of it? I've always trusted my uncle, but if it's true and I killed someone, how can I live with myself? The food arrived. It looked fresh, but for some reason Christopher didn't have much of an appetite anymore. I don't think anymore is necessary. But, I don't know, when I read it in my head it makes sense. When I read it out loud it sounds dumb. So I should change it. I'm just going to get rid of more. The food arrived. It looked fresh, but for some reason, Christopher didn't have much of an appetite. I'm going to say no longer. Does the same thing as anymore did at the end of the sentence, but it makes it flow better. The food arrived. It looked fresh, but for some reason, Christopher no longer had much of an appetite. Perfect. Exactly what I wanted to end on. See, reading it out loud helps, because I probably wouldn't have caught that if I didn't read it out loud. Draven got up early to make sure he had the right clothing to blend in on campus. Draven tried to dress up like a college youth, but he admitted to himself he was not with the times. Yet he managed to do a pretty good job. He even went out and bought a book bag and put some books in it to complete the guise. He had been following Christopher ever since he had left for school. Nothing all that unique happened. He had followed Christopher all morning, including into 2 classes. Draven hadn't. I was thinking that saying that all morning was redundant, but technically he could have went to college in the afternoon. But it is a little clunky. I'll fix it later. Draven hadn't gone into the classrooms himself. He sat in the hallway and was able to hear the classroom well enough. The first class, they were discussing the book. Ooh, I forgot to look up a book name. Completely forgot. I'm gonna not just have an asterisk there, but a highlight so it's more noticeable. There we go. Still gotta find a book that they'd be reading, analyzing the 1960s. And I don't know my literature that well. Maybe some Kafka. But I was thinking more modern. Not just, yeah. I don't know. Doesn't really matter as long as I get a time-appropriate book. The second class he went to was a history course. They were discussing the 30 Years' War in Europe. Both classes, Draven couldn't see what he was doing, but he never heard him speak. So he assumed he had no questions. Both classes were lectures. Between classes, Christopher sat in the courtyard and read his history textbook. After his class, Draven followed Christopher to a little cafe near campus. In fact, it was right next to one of the school's courtyards. Christopher took a seat at an empty table. Draven leaned up against a tree that was a good distance, I think. Draven leaned up against a tree that was a good distance away from Christopher. He was in such a spot that he could still easily see and hear him. He looked out of one of the books he was carrying. He took out one of the books he was carrying, a novel called The Black Cauldron, with the intention to use it as cover to watch Christopher. It wasn't long before his uncle came and sat at the table. Seeing the uncle, Draven's first instinct was to sneak away. He knew him. It was Theron, the last person he expected to see. He hadn't seen him in over 300 years, and he wasn't sure he wanted to see him now. Interesting people this boy knows. He had fought off his instinct. He had fought off his first instinct and continued to watch and listen. And apparently, Theron sees something in this boy that might explain a few things. Seems the boy doesn't just know how to fight, but also lives to fight. Their conversation was broken up by the waitress who came and took their order. Then they continued talking. Draven almost smiled as he heard them talking about the recent murder. I'm going to say as they began. That said heard too many times. Draven almost smiled as they began talking about the recent murder. The person I had killed. So, the boy has taken the blame. That could be useful. Suddenly, the uncle stood up, and Draven went deadly still. Can he sense me? I've overstayed my welcome. Draven quickly took a step backwards behind the tree and melded into its shadow. Yeah, I put the wasn't supposed to be there. Melded into its shadow and disappeared. Draven stepped out of the shadows of his hotel room. I hope he didn't see me. I should never have stayed as long as I did. This is getting interesting. Gotta take a drink of water really quick. It was a few days later in the evening when Christopher was walking home through a park. He had stayed late again, working with a group from his history class. It was boring and tedious, but he was doing his best. He wanted to make his family proud, and of course, make sure his uncle would follow through with helping him in starting his boxing career. He could not help but feel a sense of guilt and dread over the unknown fate of the man in the alley. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had taken a life. He played the moment over and over in his mind. He could have gone for a less sensitive area than his windpipe. He knew why his uncle always taught him to avoid fighting. You never know what is going to happen. The air was crisp. The recent rain brought a freshness to the air. The clouds were broken up, and you could periodically see the half moon that hung in the air. Christopher walked along the path that took him by the bathrooms. He was deep in his own thoughts when the two men who he had last seen in the alley a few days ago. I'm going to have to read that over again. He was deep in his own thoughts when the two men who he had last seen in the alley a few days ago, came out from behind the bathrooms. One was holding a stick in his hand, and the other had a chain wrapped around his right hand. They moved onto the path, blocking Christopher. Christopher heard movement behind him and glanced back. 3 other men walked from behind the bathroom, surrounding him. One of them carried a bat, another carried a knife, and knife is fine, I'm gonna unhighlight that. And the third person was wearing brass knuckles on his hand. Christopher looked back to the man with the stick standing in front of him. Oh, I read that wrong. Okay, that's why it sounded funny. Christopher looked back as the man with the stick standing in front of him spoke. You killed Frank, or some woman. Christopher casually unslung his book satchel. I didn't kill anyone. I stopped Frank and you from raping that woman. Christopher had never had to fight more than one person before. He had been practicing for this for most of his life. He needed to separate the group more and fight as few of them at one time as possible. He decided he would stop the one in front of him with the stick first. He then turned to the man with the chain. Wrong inflection. He decided he would stop the one in front of him with the stick first, then turn to the man with the chain. If he was lucky, he would be able to break away from the pack and run away. I'm going to say be able to break from the pack and run away, because away was said a few too many times for my liking. If he was slow, the 3 behind him would be able to attack him. If he was too slow, okay, I did say 2. The man with the stick growled as he spoke. Bullshit, you killed him. The cops wouldn't listen to us, but we know you. And the man grunted as the satchel that Christopher was carrying was launched into his chest. The man stumbled backwards. Christopher launched forward, pushing the man a few steps further. He grabbed the wrist of the arm holding the stick, twisted it, and made him drop it. Christopher grabbed the stick midair as it fell. The man swung with his left hand, but Christopher sidestepped. Christopher then used the stick to hit the man in the stomach, knocking the air out of him. He then punched the man in the jaw with his open hand, and the man crumpled to the ground, unconscious. As Christopher turned to face the other man, he punched on... I'm going to say the man with the chain. Better identifier. As Christopher turned to face the man with the chain, he was punched on the side of the face above his eye from the hand wrapped in the chain. He took a step back at the impact. The momentary shock of metal hitting his face quickly passed. He recovered just in time. The man started to take another swing. Christopher used his stick to bash the man's arm and moved in. Christopher grabbed the man, using the stick as leverage, fell backwards and threw the man behind him onto the ground. Christopher quickly followed that up by smashing his fist into the man's head, incapacitating him. I'm going to change it because, no, I guess that flows alright. Christopher expected that the other three people had taken the time to move in when he was momentarily dazed. He quickly got to his feet and glanced back. He hoped he had enough space between him and the other three so that he could run away. Christopher did not expect what he saw. While the adrenaline was still running, he was shocked out of the fighting urgency he had a moment ago. Standing there over the bodies of three people was one man. He stood at the edge of the light that was being put out by the street lamp. He was standing perfectly still in a long brown trench coat, and as the wind blew, his black hair moved and his trench coat flapped. In the moments that passed, a few red leaves fell off the nearby trees, streaking across the scene. The man broke the silence first. "You fight well, but there is room for improvement. Your Uncle Oliver has taught you well." Too many wells. I need to change a well. I'm going to say you fight with precision. You fight with precision, but there is room for improvement. Your Uncle Oliver has taught you well. That sounds better. Christopher was grateful for the man's help, but he still felt on edge, and it wasn't just adrenaline. The man gave off an aura unlike anyone else. He had met few people who had the presence this man had. Oliver was one of them. His Uncle Oliver made him feel safe, but sometimes he got the impression that he unnerved other people. This character had a similar presence, but he didn't feel safe, and he felt he should run, but he held his ground. "Thank you for helping me, but how do you know Uncle Oliver, and how do you know he taught me?" The man smiled ever so slightly. "I've known the man you know as Oliver for a long time. If you want to know how I know it, that's a tale for him to tell. I knew he taught you because I could see it in the way you fought. It's subtle, but I can see his hand in your teaching." Christopher ignored the fact the person didn't answer his question and moved the conversation on. "Thank you for helping me. I wasn't sure I was going to make it out alive. What's your name so I can thank you properly?" "My name is Draven." Christopher was careful not to let the surprise over the unusual name show on his face. He walked toward Draven and extended his hand. Draven extended his own hand and they shook as Christopher spoke. "Thank you, Draven. You may have saved my life." Draven's hand was cold to the touch, very rigid, his grasp very firm. It felt like rock. Despite acting normal, Christopher was very uneasy. He felt like running. He wanted to get the interaction over with. He wanted to get this interaction over as fast as he could. I'm going to add with, because it sounds a lot better. "Hey, hello Oswald. Thanks for making it. I'm just reading the story and editing along the way. Oh, billing alert." And there should be a comma there. And if you have any questions, go ahead and ask. I don't mind breaking up the story to do some chatting. Draven made it. Draven smelled. Oh wait, I'm gonna go back to the sentence I just fixed. Despite acting normal, Christopher was very uneasy. He felt like running. He wanted to get this interaction over with as fast as he could. Much better. If there is anything I can do for you, let me know. It is late though, and I should be getting along. Raven smiled, and it made Christopher feel like running. I'm saying running too often. I need to change that. In this, I'll leave running to begin with. I want to say escaping, because it adds a little bit more tension to the scene, I think, because it's more urgent than just saying running. It's like he needs to escape from the situation. Raven smiled, and it made Christopher feel like escaping. I'm sure I'll be able to find you if I decide to collect on that debt. Give Oliver my best. Christopher said, of course, and turned around, dropped the stick, and picked up his book satchel. He headed towards home once again. He did his best to maintain a casual pace, but as soon as he turned the corner on the trail, he took off running and didn't stop till he got home. The next morning, Christopher ran the few miles to his uncle's house. His uncle had been out of town for the last... I want to say he jogged, because it sounds more like it's leisurely, more for exercise. Running just sounds like you're escaping something. So jogging makes more sense. Next morning, Christopher jogged the few miles to his uncle's house. His uncle had been out of town for the last few weeks, and they hadn't had a chance to do any martial practice. He walked up the steps to the house and knocked on the door. The door opened with Oliver standing on the other side. He looked... He smiled. Good morning, come in. I see you've done your warm-up already. Very good. Christopher walked in and his uncle closed the door. Good morning, Uncle. Oliver asked, how are your parents? Christopher answered, they are good. They took a trip to the lake for the weekend though. They won't be back till Monday. That's when Oliver noticed the cut above Christopher's eye. Oliver reached out with his hand and lightly outlined the cut above the eye with his finger. I was thinking about adding something about his how your family, and then talk about the brothers, but I don't think the conversation should be that long because Oliver would immediately ask about the cut above his eye and interrupt the conversation. So maybe I should say, how are your parents, or how are your family? You know, like, they're good. They took a trip to for the weekend though. They won't be back till Monday. My oldest brother John, and then have it interrupted. Yeah, I'm gonna have it interrupted. Got spell interrupted correctly. Alright, let's read that paragraph over again. See if it flows alright. And, you know, drop it in a little bit more that he has brothers. Christopher answered, they're good. They took a trip to the lake for the weekend. They won't be back till Monday. I talked to my brother John the other day, too. That's when Oliver noticed the cut above Christopher's eye and interrupted. Yeah, what do you guys think? I think that flows pretty well. Didn't make it awkward, I don't think. Oliver reached out with his hand and lightly outlined the cut above the eye with his finger. What happened here? Christopher lowered his head. Uncle, I got into another fight. Two of the men from the alley... Two of the men from the alley confronted me. They also brought 3 of their friends. I thought they were going to kill me. They said I killed their friend Frank. Oliver gently lifted Christopher's head and looked into his eyes. You didn't kill anyone. I talked to the police. The man Frank died from a broken neck and a cracked skull. It looked like he fell off the building. They are ruling it an accident. The relief in Christopher's eyes was obvious. So I didn't kill him? No, you didn't. Now don't think about it again. Oliver turned and walked down the hall, into the dining room and out of the back door. Okay, I'm going to reread that. So I think it's correctly, I just read it with the wrong inflection. Oliver turned and walked down the hall, into the dining room and out the back door. Christopher followed him. Doesn't need to say him, I don't think. Oh shit! Thanks, Oswald, for subscribing. And being a 3-month subscriber. I think you're, the first 3-month subscriber. At least the first one that's posted in chat about it. That's a big thank you and a big hello. Really appreciate that. Oliver turned and walked down the hall, into the dining room and out the back door. Christopher followed. Yeah, I didn't have to have him. It sounds much better. Oliver had a large backyard, even for the outskirts of the city. There was even a second building in the backyard. It was a workshop at one point, but Oliver had it converted into a dojo. He continued to the building, but Christopher stopped in the middle of the yard and spoke. Uncle, do you know a man named Draven? Oh, that reminds me. I want to show off my bit, because I don't know if you've seen my new bit, or my new emote. Just gonna throw them out here really quickly. I am super excited for him. It is McDuck. Scrooge McDuck. He is like my favorite all-time like character. And so, you know, our Loctavian thought about it and he had an emote made for me and it's great. It's kind of hard to get on the channel because, you know, it's McDuck with, you know, a bunch of money. He's rich. So it takes a bunch of money to unlock him. But I'm happy with him. Really happy. I hope someone unlocks him at some point. You have to unlock him by, it's a 10,000 bit award for one of them, and then the third tier subscription. They're just flipped different ways. So I guess there's 2 ways to get a similar emote, depending on how you think about it. Alright, back to the story. Oh, I'm gonna take a drink of water really quick. Oliver immediately stopped. There was a momentary pause before he turned around. Raven, that sounds familiar. Why do you ask? Christopher hesitated a moment. Well, he helped me in the fight. He took out 3 of the men behind me. Oh, yeah. He took out the 3 men behind me. I don't know if I would have survived without him. Oliver raised an eyebrow. What did this person look like? He looked about 5 feet 10 or 5'11". Oh, I didn't actually add the word feet. He stood 5'10" or 5'11". Either he had dark brown hair or black hair. I couldn't tell. It was too dark. It's probably... yeah, figured. He had green eyes. I didn't see him fight, but he must be a fighter. His grip was as firm as rock. And he did take out 3 men without breaking a sweat. Not a wheat. I don't know why, but he made me feel very uneasy. Took everything I had not to run away. Oliver nodded. Ah, yes, Draven, I know him. I have not seen or heard of him in a long time. Shall we continue? Okay, Uncle. Christopher wanted to ask more, but his uncle obviously didn't want to talk about Draven. When Oliver didn't want to talk about a subject, he didn't. He had learned better than to push when his uncle was like this. If it was important, he would tell him about it. That didn't make it any less annoying to Christopher. Christopher followed Oliver into the dojo. It was a large empty space with a clean cement floor. There were various weapons hung up on the walls, from swords to spears. Even some shields, I must say. There are also trained weapons, one of which Oliver walked over to and picked up off of the rack. It was a rattan stick, about 3 feet long. He handed it to Christopher. I want you to do all the basic forms. First, put on the weighted clothes. Christopher took the stick and walked over to the chest at the end of the large room. He opened it, rummaged around, and pulled out his shirt and put it on. It had pockets on the outsides where he put in metal weights. He then reached into the chest and pulled on weighted ankle and wristbands. He picked up the stick and moved into the middle of the room and took a stance. He was about to begin when his uncle interrupted. Do them as slowly as you can. Make sure every movement is precise. Oliver watched him intently as Christopher worked on his forms. With the added weight, he struggled to do it as slowly as he would have liked. Nearly an hour later, and his forehead was beaded with sweat, but he was done. His muscles were sore. The whole time Oliver walked around him. There were a few moments when he faltered, and Oliver had to correct him. When he was done, Oliver nodded and said, "Good job. Take a break. Get some water and take off the weights. Next, we'll do some sparring and see what you can do." Christopher walked over to the chest, took out the weights from his shirt, and put them away. He then took off the shirt, put the ankle and wrist weights. He then took off the shirt, the ankle and wrist weights, and put them into the chest. He went to the house and got a drink of water and came back out to the dojo. When he got back, Oliver had 2 rattan sticks in hand and handed Christopher one. "Ready?" Christopher nodded. They started 10 feet apart. There were a few minutes where neither of them moved. Christopher shot forward and attacked. Oliver was pushed back, but he effortlessly knocked aside the swings. At one point, Christopher took a more aggressive step, unbalancing himself, and Oliver took his chance. The sidestep Christopher stepped forward, so he was now behind him, hitting Christopher on the back with his stick. Christopher regained his balance and turned back to his uncle. They squared off again. This time Oliver did his best to hold off advancing, keeping his anticipation in check. This time Oliver moved in, slowly circling around Christopher. Christopher matched Oliver's movements until Oliver made a move to attack. He was testing Christopher's reactions. Eventually Oliver made a more aggressive move. He stepped into Christopher's circle of influence, knocked aside Christopher's stick, and body bashed him, sending him flying back several feet, nearly making him fall to the ground. Christopher lost patience and moved into attack his uncle, but his momentum was turned against him and he found himself laying on his back. The sparring continued for the next hour with a few breaks in between. I'm going to say in between. The sparring continued for the next hour with a few breaks in between matches. Christopher never once scored a hit on his uncle, but he did get close to landing a grapple, but it was turned against him at the last moment. Today was not the day he would finally beat Oliver. After they were done fighting, Oliver said that was enough for the day. Christopher went into the house and took a quick shower to rinse off the sweat. He met his uncle in the living room. "I called a cab for you. It's been a few weeks since we practiced. Why don't you give those muscles a rest? No need to jog home today." Christopher smiled. "Thanks, Uncle. It has been an exhausting day, especially after the night I had." The cab arrived and Christopher got in. He saw his uncle wave him off as he headed home. Oliver watched Christopher drive away in the cab. He went into the house and grabbed his keys, walked over to his car and got in. He caught up to the cab but kept his distance. When Christopher got home, Oliver picked his car. I still need to say what kind of car, but I never really looked it up. It's not that important. Alright. When Christopher got home, Oliver parked his car a few blocks away and got out. He positioned himself across the street in the park. He sat down on a bench, is what I'm going to say. He sat down on a bench where he could monitor the area, but not in direct sight of the house. Still, when he focused, he could hear Christopher moving around inside. Oliver spent the day in the park, keeping his ears on Christopher and his eyes on the surrounding area. He was on the lookout. Is it probably one word? Yeah. He was on the lookout for Draven. He didn't know the man's intentions, but he was too dangerous to allow him to follow Christopher unchecked. Every hour or so, Oliver would get up from the bench and walk around the area, but he made sure he could keep his ears on Christopher. Eventually, he heard Christopher pick up the telephone and talk to one of his friends. They made plans to go to a dance at the college with a group of friends. It was being held in the gym that evening. The whole while, Oliver was extending his senses to his surroundings, trying to tell if there were any vampires in the area. He knew Draven had the ability to block his sensing, but he tried anyways. Draven's ability to block it wasn't perfect, and he may slip up, allowing Oliver to pinpoint him. Several hours passed, and night was setting in when Christopher left the house. Oliver made sure to stay out of sight, but continued to follow Christopher. They went through the park, then cut through a few alleyways to get to the school. Christopher met up with his friends, and they went into the gym together. Oliver stayed out of the gym and sat in a bench out front. He made sure that he was off to the side, so if Christopher walked out, he wouldn't immediately see him. There were people milling about out front, socializing, taking a break from the dance. Oliver made sure he could still hear Christopher despite the music. It was difficult, but he could make out him talking to his friends. After a time, Oliver stood up and walked around the building, keeping his ears focused on the inside and his other senses on the surrounding area. He doubted Draven would go into the dance itself and confront Christopher, but he was ready for that eventuality. At one point, Christopher walked out of the gym to get some air. Oliver made sure to stay in the shadows so he wouldn't be seen. That's when Oliver felt it, that creeping cold, that unnatural feeling like a solar eclipse blocking out the sun. He was sure Draven was near. It was a unique feeling only Draven invoked. He increased his visual surveillance. It took a moment, but he found him, Draven, off at a distance, leaning against the other building and watching. I'm going to reread that sentence there. It took a moment, but he found him, Draven, off at a distance, leaning against another building, watching Christopher. Okay. It's a good sentence, but a little choppy to read out loud. Oliver shot off at a blinding speed, so fast most people wouldn't be able to see him. One moment he was next to the gym, the next he was standing next to Draven. He was tense, not sure what to expect, but was ready for whatever may come. To his credit, Draven didn't look surprised. As Oliver appeared next to him, he stopped leaning against the building and stood up straight. He looked over at Oliver. "Hello, Theron. It has been a long time. Are you out hunting tonight? Have you found your prey?" Oliver stood there guarded and emotionless. "It has been a while. Why are you here?" Draven narrowed his eyes. "You didn't answer my question. Are you hunting? Mortals or immortals?" Oliver decided to put Draven's mind at ease and answer the question. "I don't hunt mortals anymore. As to immortals, I was seeking you out." Draven did not move, but Oliver sensed him tightening up. Ready. I don't know if that's spelled correctly. I did not. Readying to strike. There we go. Draven did not move, but Oliver sensed him tightening up, readying to strike. "So, Theron, you've decided it is my time now? I won't go easy. I might win. You don't even have your sword." Draven nodded over to all the people in the front of the gym. "Besides, you wouldn't want your precious mortals to get hurt, would you? If we fought, they would all die." Oliver looked over to the people and then back at Draven. "Have you become so callous over the last few hundred years? I was looking for you, not looking to kill you, but to find out your intentions towards Christopher." Draven shrugged ever so slightly. Ever so slightly. "It's not callousness, it's practicality. If we were to fight, I'd certainly need their blood to defeat you. I hold no ill will towards them. As to Christopher, he intrigues me. I want him." Oliver asked, "You want him? What do you want him for?" Draven stated simply, I think I like it better simply stated. No. Draven stated simply, I want to make him mine, to turn him. Oliver stood there thinking, Draven wants to sire someone? He hasn't done that since before the Crusades. Why now? Why Christopher? What use is he to Draven? Oliver asked, why do you want Christopher? Draven looked off towards where Christopher was standing with his friends. He's a fighter, but that's not really why. He looked back at Christopher. The other day, he incapacitated my prey right before I fed on him. I swear that some part of Christopher, deep down, sensed that I was there. I haven't seen one like that in an age. He's special. I want him as mine. He has more potential than most, and I want the challenge of bringing that out. Oliver was surprised, but didn't let it show. Had Christopher really sensed that Draven was near? If so, that would indeed be impressive. If so, that would indeed be impressive. He was the seventh son of a seventh son. Perhaps he was too close to Christopher to notice a special gift. Oliver thought Christopher was special too. Oliver thought Christopher was special too. Not all seven sons are, though. He took to his training like few others he had trained. The discipline he showed would help make for a more stable and potentially powerful vampire. He hadn't seen someone like this in a long time either. You can't. He's under my protection. I'll be the one to decide if he'll be a vampire, and it'll be by my making. Draven's eyes hardened and his body tensed up. No, he is mine. Stay out of my way this one time, or I will end you. Oliver looked down at Draven, surprised. No, not looked down. Oliver looked at Draven, surprised. He even let some of that surprise slip into his face. And the whole time that Oliver had known Draven, he had never been willing to kill over a mortal. What changed? Perhaps this is another way. Perhaps there is another way. I too want him as my own. We should let him decide who will turn him. Draven looked over at Christopher. He stared, deep in thought, before turning back to Oliver. That may work. I have no desire to kill you, and I know I may lose. We have fought many battles together, and never once were we on opposite sides. I am willing to compromise this one time. He must decide soon. Oliver felt a small sense of relief. He did not want to fight here out in the open, and not on... He did not want to fight here out in the open and not on his own. And it makes sense, but it sounds awkward at first. Let's see. He did not want to fight here out in the open, especially not. I'm gonna say especially. Especially not on his own terms. Especially when it was not on it. Okay, that sounds better. Oliver felt a small sense of relief. He did not want to fight here, out in the open, and especially when it was not on his own terms. Why must it be soon? He is still young. He has much to learn, and I don't want to turn him and have him regret having some resemblance. And have him regret not having had. Alright, let's read that again. He is still young. He has much to learn, and I don't want to turn him and make him. I don't want to turn him and make him regret not having had some resemblance of a mortal life. Draven shook his head. He is of age, right? He is of the right age. He is a man. You have grown too accustomed to the normalcies of this age. He is ready to be turned. I will not wait. Oliver thought for a moment. Maybe he shouldn't push this. This compromise was already tenuous at best. Fine, if he chooses you. Oh, okay, fine. If he chooses you, I won't stop you from turning him now. However, when the time comes, I urge you to reconsider and let him have some normalcy before bringing him into our world. Draven nodded. I will consider it. Oliver let out a mental sigh. That is something at least. We can meet tomorrow and talk to him. I have no doubt this will be a shock to him. Draven shook his head ever so slightly. No, I'll talk to him myself. I will not force a choice on him at our next meeting, but it will be soon. At this, he turned and made ready to leave, but he looked back at Oliver. It was agreeable to see you again. I am still yours. I'll join the hunt again if you find that is necessary. You know I enjoy a challenge. And then he quickly moved off and disappeared into the darkness. Oliver watched as Draven disappeared. He no longer felt Draven's presence. Either he had his guard down before to lure him in, or it had just slipped. Oliver wasn't sure. He looked over at Christopher, who was walking back into the gym with friends. He had his answer. He now knew why Draven was following Christopher. He moved off towards his car and began to make his way home. Christopher walked out of the gym. He was tired and a little exhausted from dancing all night. He had a good time, met some new people, and especially enjoyed his time with Jennifer. She was a wonderful dance partner. He looked forward to seeing her again. He had just waved to his friends and started home when he caught something out of the corner of his eye. Turning to look, he saw the man Draven go behind the gym. Christopher considered not following him, but his curiosity got the better of him and he followed, going behind the gym. It sounds okay, but I say going behind the gym twice in 2 sentences. So I kind of want to break that up a little bit. Christopher considered not following him, but his curiosity got the better of him, and he also went behind the gym. I'm going to say that. Let's read those 2 sentences to see if that made much of an impact. Turning to look, he saw the man Draven go behind the gym. Christopher considered not following him, but his curiosity got the better of him and he followed, also going behind the gym. And he also made it a little bit better. He moved quickly to catch up to him despite hurrying. But despite hurrying, when he got behind the gym, Draven was nowhere to be seen. Then, all of a sudden, what's this suggesting? Then, all of a sudden, he felt the chill come over his body and heard Draven's voice behind him. How did he do that? Hello, Christopher. It's a pleasure to see you again so soon. You had fun tonight, I hope? Christopher nearly jumped, but managed to keep calm and turned around, facing Draven. I did have fun, thank you. Are you following me? Draven nodded. You caught me. I have been following you. Ever since you beat up that man in the alleyway. Alleyway is one word, I think? Yeah. Christopher thought back to that day. He didn't know how he knew this, but he was certain that the feeling he felt leaving the alley was his body's way of telling him that Draven had been there. He knew now that Draven was the person who killed Frank that night. It was you killed Frank. Draven grinned, showing his teeth. Christopher noticed the bigger than average incisors. Yes, I killed that man. I'd been following him for a while that night. I was the hunter, and he my prey. I fed on him and dropped him back down in the alleyway, which is one word. I have been hunting through the ages, feeding, killing as I pleased, and I want you to join me. Christopher stood there with his mouth open. He was in shock. This man Draven was a murderer. You wanted him to join him? Join him what? Some sort of hunting sport? No, he said he'd been doing this for ages. How old was he? What was he? He looked at Draven again. He was no longer smiling. But the thought came... Okay, but he thought back to those teeth, the incisors. He said it had been feeding. No, it couldn't be, could it? Is he a vampire? Christopher didn't want to believe it. What's it suggesting? Yeah, I guess a comment. Christopher didn't want to believe it. But he knew, in his soul, however unlikely, that vampires were real, and that he was now face to face with one. Didn't want, not what. I'm gonna say he felt rather than knew. Christopher didn't want to believe it, but he felt in his soul, however unlikely, that vampires were real, and he was now face to face with one. He wanted to run away, but his legs wouldn't respond. He was stuck there, unable to move. He spoke in a shaky voice. No longer able to hide his feelings, he spoke in a shaky voice. What do you want from me? I want you to join me, to become a vampire, and let me teach you all I know. You have a fighting spirit. I can nurture it and bring it out the best in you. It's probably a semicolon suggestion. Yep. Hooray for semicolons. Make me a vampire, immortality, but at what cost? To live a life of bloodshed? Christopher could feel some sort of weight pressing down on his body. He felt heavy, his mind was fuzzy. It was hard to think, but he managed to shake his head ever so slightly. No, thank you. Draven laughed ever so slightly. You think you have a choice? Normally you wouldn't, but this time... Normally you wouldn't, but not this time. For some reason that doesn't really fit like I like, so I'm going to try and work this sentence a little bit here. I'm going to finish the paragraph, then I'll rework the sentence. Draven laughed ever so slightly. You think you have a choice? Normally you wouldn't, but not this time. You do have a choice, but not the one you think you have. Not the one you probably want. Normally you wouldn't. Let's see. Do you think you have a choice? Normally you wouldn't. However, this time is... You think you have a choice? Normally you wouldn't. However, this time is different. You do have a choice, but not the one you think you have. Not the one you probably want. Christopher raised his eyebrow quizzically. What do you mean? Draven smiled. You will find out soon enough. Speak with your uncle. Next time you see me, you'll have to make your choice. At that, Draven disappeared, melting into the shadows. Any doubt that might have been in Christopher's mind left at... Any doubt that... This man was a vampire... Any doubt that this man was a vampire... Yeah, I think this is a better sentence here. Any doubt that this man was a vampire left at the sight of Draven melting into nothingness. I'm gonna change it again. Normally I don't make a longer sentence, but I kind of want to check the flow of this sentence here. Any doubt that Christopher might have had that this man was a vampire left at the sight of Draven melting into nothingness. Little long, but I think it's better than the one before. There is always a chance that next time I read this, I will read this sentence again and change it back to something similar. We'll just see next edit. But I'm fine with it now. The weight that Christopher felt lifted. Uncle Oliver knew Draven. Did he know he was a vampire? Okay. I kind of want to indicate that the weight that was lifted was because Draven left, not because his Uncle Oliver knew that Draven might be a vampire. The weight that Christopher felt left when Draven melded into the shadows. Oliver knew Draven. Did he know he was a vampire? Christopher took off at a run, trying to put as much space between him and the scene that he had unfolded before him. It didn't take long for him to get home, and despite the cold, he was covered in sweat. He was out of breath. He didn't stop till he was inside the house. He slammed the door behind him, locked it, and collapsed inside. He sat there against the door for a while, catching his breath before standing back up. He immediately walked to the kitchen, picked up the phone, and called his uncle. He didn't even care that it was past midnight. The phone rang 3 times before his uncle picked up. Hello, Oliver speaking. Uncle Oliver, I saw him again, Draven. You'll think I'm crazy, you probably won't believe me, but he isn't human. I think he's a vampire. Christopher thought that his uncle would think him crazy, that he would laugh, tell him that he was making things up or imagining things. But he didn't, and that's what worried Christopher the most. Christopher. Don't go anywhere, I'll be right over. We need to talk. On the other end of the phone, Oliver spoke. Christopher, don't go anywhere. I'll be right over. We need to talk. Okay, so that ends the edit part of the stream, where I go back and read this whole story. Did a couple edits along the way, nothing major. Did add in that Christopher is the 7th son of a 7th son, and that it may have given him a special ability of some sort, but it is not always the case with 7th sons of 7th sons. So, yeah. If you have any questions about the edit, or you want to watch that part, I will have it up on YouTube in the next couple days. I have a YouTube channel. It's called Bailey Warren's Story Corner. Actually, I have 2 YouTube channels, but that's the one that my VODs go to, is Bailey Warren's Story Corner. I also have one where I do LARP stuff and gaming stuff called Bailey Warren. So yeah, you can check that out if you want. So we're gonna roll into Oliver, or the next scene. Originally, I was going to do this scene as Oliver's perspective, where his uncle comes over. Oliver explains that Draven is really a vampire. Christopher is confused, asks all questions. Oliver eventually tells Christopher that he is too a vampire. Christopher is dumbstruck, asks if his parents knows. He says yes. Christopher feels betrayed, gets angry, asks about his plan. Oliver tells him about a long tradition of him following his family and choosing new vampires from that family. Chris tells Oliver to leave. End the scene. Now, I'll be honest, and I was finally honest with myself. The reason why I was going to do it from Oliver's perspective is because it would be easier for me. It'd be easier to write what happened from Oliver's perspective, because I know Oliver's perspective better than I know Christopher's perspective. And Oliver would only be observing the outward emotions of Christopher, and that also makes it easier. It means I don't have to be as descriptive or be as careful about displaying the emotions from an internal point of view, I guess. I mean, external, I still have to show the emotions and stuff like that, which can be kind of hard for me. But not having the internal emotions would be easier to write, I think. So I decided I'm not doing it from Oliver's perspective. I'm not going to take the easier route. I'm going to do this next scene from Christopher's perspective and make sure I get it right, because I want it to be the best story it can be. So we're going to get into the writing here, and as always, interrupt me, ask me questions. I will be speaking less because I'll be typing. Alright, so I'm going to start with Christopher opening the door, I guess. No, that's not what I'm going to start with. I'm going to start with Christopher having gone around his house, turned up all the lights, locked all the windows, just to highlight his nervousness, even though he knows that none of that will probably help him. It makes him feel better to have his whole house lit up and locked down after something so traumatic. Hopefully that is relatable. You know, when you walk in the dark and you kind of get scared and you scare yourself when you're younger and kind of run home and then have to turn on all the lights to make sure that darkness doesn't get you. It's that kind of feeling that Christopher is having now because he knows monsters are real. Alright, Christopher spent the time waiting for his uncle by turning on all the lights of the house. He even made sure to lock every door and every window. He didn't think that it would help, but it gave him a sense of safety he was drastically yearning for. He was just walking back downstairs when he heard a knock on the door. He was only expecting his uncle, but he didn't think he could get here. He mentioned he expected it to be his uncle, but he didn't think he could get here so fast. He walked to the door, checked who it was by looking through the peephole. He saw his uncle standing there in a black trench coat. Christopher was relieved and opened the door, letting his uncle in. And I don't know why that was a separate sentence. Christopher was relieved and opened the door, letting his uncle in. "Hello, Uncle. I'm sorry it's so late." "Come in." Alright. Oliver walked in. "Hello. I'm glad you called me." I'm not even going to say he said hello. I'm just going to make it abrupt. Oliver walked in. "I'm glad you called me. Maybe we should sit down." I noticed, and I noticed this a while ago, I have the tendency to do simple nods for everything. So I'm trying not to do it very often, but I mean, it's just a way of acknowledgement. I mean, like, I do it, so I figure other people do it. Just like, when someone's talking, you just kind of nod. But man, it feels like it gets a little repetitive sometimes. So I try not to do it too much in like a scene, but I do it a lot overall in my writing. And I don't know if that's good or bad, it's just what I do. No, I was gonna have him speak. Christopher nodded. "A good idea." Let's say they both walked into the living room. Christopher sat down on the couch, while Oliver took a seat in the recliner. Oliver said nothing. Patiently waited for Christopher to say to speak first. Alright, let's take a look at this paragraph. It looked like Christopher was about to speak. He looked over at his uncle, his mouth open, but nothing came out, and he closed it again. He's going to think I'm insane. He stood up and started pacing the room. He couldn't sit still, all the while his uncle was just watching him. Maybe he'll think I'm insane, but Draven was the one to tell me to talk to Oliver. He couldn't sit still, all the while his uncle was just watching him. Maybe he'll think I'm insane, but Draven was the one to tell me to talk to Oliver. Why is that? They did know each other. I need to go back and check something so I can make sure this dialogue is accurate. Alright, he did tell him specifically that he'd seen Draven. Alright, got it. Oh, sorry. Covered up that. Let's see. After a bit of pacing, Christopher finally decided what he would say and turned to Oliver. Draven is a vampire. He expected his uncle to start laughing, call him crazy. Alright, after a bit of pacing, Christopher finally decided what he would say and turned to Oliver. Draven is a vampire. He expected his uncle to start laughing, call him crazy, maybe he'd even put him in a mental hospital. But his uncle did nothing, and it was unnerving. Christopher spoke a bit unsteadily, filling in the silence. Not silent, silence. He said I should talk to you. Trying to figure out exactly how I want Oliver to speak here to kind of sets the tone for the rest of chat and how it goes. His uncle unfolded his hands in front of him in contemplation before beginning to speak. Yes, I was expecting this. I talked to Draven tonight. Oh, that uncle up here should be capitalized too. You knew his intentions? What are you going to do about it? How do we stop a vampire? Alright. You knew his intentions? What are we going to do about it? How do we stop a vampire? I don't want to die. Oliver sighed. Sorry, but you don't have a choice. You're going to die, and you're going to become a vampire. But you do have a choice about who turns you. I'm trying to figure out here how I want the internal dialogue to go. Specifically, well, I'll read what I have right now. Christopher didn't understand. I don't have a choice. Has he already given up on me? That's not like him. But I also kind of want him to question what he means by turns you. And I'm trying to think, because everyone that reads the story will probably understand what he means by that, but that doesn't mean that in reality he would actually know what turns means. Although in context it makes sense. But still trying to decide how I want to do this. Sorry, I am not as fluid as I have in the other streams at this point. Alright, I think I figured it out here. Christopher didn't understand. I don't have a choice. Has he already given up on me? That's not like him. He didn't say anything and went back and sat down on the couch. The hint of a stunned look still on his face. What did he mean, a choice of who turns me? There is another vampire. He looked over at his uncle. See, I'm not exactly sure what would be his first question to his uncle at this point. So I have to kind of get in his head or whatever and think about his thought process here. See, because if it's all new information and he probably has questions about all of it, but what is sticking out in his mind the most? Yeah, he'll ask about the choice. What do you mean I have a choice? A choice about who turns me? Alright, so Oliver's gonna talk about this, but I'm trying to figure out his opening inflection or how he starts speaking. I don't want to say Oliver said, because that is not very descriptive. I was just going to say Oliver's side, but I got it. It's going to be a pity, guys. A pity crossing his face. Oliver sat there, a slight look of pity across his face. Yes, you'll be able to choose who kills you and turns you into a vampire. Alright, so Oliver's starting to realize that he's going to be meeting another vampire. He's not really sure that Oliver is a vampire because he's known him for most of his life, so it doesn't. He's never even possibly considered that Oliver was anything supernatural, so he should be absolutely surprised and should not come to his mind that Oliver is a vampire. But he's still being put, like, he still realizes that he's being put in a place where he's not only has been met one vampire, he's going to have to meet another vampire. Or vampires, if he gets the choice of which one. So I'm trying to decide how he wants to take this conversation. Alright, let's see. Choice. What are the vampire? Oliver looked into Christopher's eyes, making sure they connected before answering. I want to say before simply stating me. doing some internal dialogue here, because I don't always use I have started using internal dialogue a lot in my writing over the last couple years, and it's just kind of my style, kind of a way to get what's in a person's head and to get their emotional state and stuff like that. It's a different tactic than describing how they're feeling. I think it's a little bit more personable. I take both approaches, but definitely do a lot of more internal dialogue that I normally see in writing. But I guess it depends on what you read, I guess, huh? Christopher's mouth dropped open. Uncle Oliver is a vampire? Impossible. I've known him most of my life. He eats food, drinks water, he walks in the daylight. It can't be. Christopher's mouth dropped open. Uncle Oliver is a vampire? Impossible. Well, that's an exclamation mark if I ever heard one. It's a perfect place for an exclamation mark. Uncle Oliver is a vampire? Impossible. I think that should also be an exclamation mark. I've known him most of my life. He eats food, drinks water, walks out in the daylight. It can't be. He managed to stammer out, how is this possible? How long have you been a vampire? Let's see. And then Oliver's going to respond. Oh, I'm getting spam. Time to get rid of spam. So. Goodbye, follow bot. Sorry about that. It happens. Alright, back to writing. Let's see what they say here about very... I'm just going to say a long time. I've been a vampire for a long time. Much longer than you've been alive. Vampires are not like in the movies. We can eat food, walk in the daylight, although our power is diminished. I've been a vampire for a long time, much longer than you've been alive. Vampires are not like in the movies. We can eat and drink food and walk in the daylight, although our power is diminished. Let's see, how would he respond to that? How's it possible? How long have you been a vampire? His uncle answers. Oh, that's the end of the hip hop track on Stream Beats, Harris Heller. So we're going to change it to, let's do some synth wave. There we go. Let's see. How do I want him to respond? Despite his shock, he was slightly relieved that vampires might not be what he thought they were. Maybe he wouldn't have to kill if he was forced to become a vampire. So, yeah. You can eat food. Does that mean you don't have to drink blood? I don't know why I capitalized blood, but it does not need to be capitalized. Oliver shook his head slightly. I'm afraid that you'll still need to drink blood. But you're lucky. You no longer need to survive. You no longer need to kill to survive. You can drink blood from blood banks. I need to double check to make sure I have Christopher sitting on the couch again, because I forget if I made him do that. Yeah, I think I did. Yeah, I did. Alright, perfect. Oliver shook his head slightly and for yeah, okay, you can drink blood from blood banks. Christopher fell back into the couch, the reality of the situation sinking in. He didn't understand why his uncle had already given up on him not becoming a vampire. Why can't we stop him from turning me into a vampire? Right. This is a question that Oliver really doesn't want to answer, but he has to. Oliver sat there searching for the right words. When I talked to him, When I talked to Draven, he was set on you becoming his vampire. It's a long story, but I won't kill him just over you. Too many other people would die because of it. You are important to me, Christopher. I care about you, but I won't let other innocent people die for you. I don't think you'd want that. Alright. Christopher was perplexed. How would other people die if I didn't become a vampire? What do you mean? Christopher was perplexed. How would other people die if I didn't become a vampire? What do you mean? Alright, perfect. Doing a little bit of a vampire lore building here by explaining about vampire. Oliver continued, I could fight him. I might win, I might lose, but in the process, he is sure to kill other mortals like yourself. That should be a sentence there. It's how vampires power their abilities. Older vampires can do some very powerful things, but it takes a lot of blood to power that. He would kill others to defeat me. I don't believe I would be able to kill him before he would resort to that. Alright, so back to Christopher and how he reacts. Oliver's right. I wouldn't want others to die for me, but I don't want to die either. So what do we do? Just give up and I become a vampire? think I am talking myself into a wall with this conversation, because I still want to add in the fact that his parents knew about this, and I should have brought that up before. Let's see if I can go back and I can work it in. But I don't know where I can logically work it in where I've already written. Yeah, probably around this area right here, I need to work in where he kind of gets mad at his parents and at Oliver. Christopher fell back into the couch. The reality of the situation seemed in. His uncle had lied to him his whole life. He looked over at his uncle. Do my parents know what you are? Oliver nodded. Yes, they know. I've known your dad. That's right. Yes, they know. I've known your dad, I won't say father, since he was a boy. Your mother found out a lot later, after she had married your father. Oliver was stunned. They knew. How could they not tell me? My whole life, everyone I trusted was living a lie. Alright, so now we're getting to the anger part, and I think it's going to make for a more comprehensive conversation. Oliver was stunned. They knew. How could they not tell me? My whole life, everyone I trusted, I was living a lie. He was furious. We wanted you to live a full life. Eventually we would have told you. I can only be ageless for so long before you'd begin to notice. Alright, I think I worked in everything I wanted to, so we can move on with the scene. I'm going to read what I added. Oliver nodded. Yes, they know. I've known your father since he was a boy. Your mother found out a lot later, after she had married your father. Oliver was stunned. They knew. How could they not tell me? My whole life, everyone I trusted, I was living a lie. He was furious. They knew? Why didn't they tell me? Why didn't you tell me? We wanted you to live a full life. Eventually, we would have told you. I can only be ageless for so long before you'd begin to notice. I could only be ageless for so long before you'd begin to notice. Christopher glared over at his uncle. How thoughtful of you. Christopher glared over at his uncle and said with some amount of disgust, how thoughtful of you. Now I have to kill one of you. He didn't understand why his uncle had already given up on him, not becoming a vampire. Why can't we stop Darren from turning me into a vampire? Oliver sat there searching for the right words. When I talked to Draven, he was set on you becoming his vampire. I'm going to say child. It's a long story, but I won't kill him just over you. Too many other people would die because of it. You are important to me, Christopher. I care about you. But I won't let other innocent people die for you. I don't think you'd want that. Christopher was perplexed. How would other people die if I didn't become a vampire? What do you mean? Oliver continued, I could fight him, I might win, I might lose, but in the process, he is sure to kill other immortals like yourself. It's how vampires power their abilities. Older vampires can do some very powerful things, but it takes a lot of blood to power that. I'm gonna say to do that. Older vampires can do some very powerful things, but it takes a lot of blood to do it. He would kill others to defeat me. I don't believe I would be able to kill him before he would resort to that. Oliver was right. I wouldn't want others to die for me. But I don't want to die either. So what do we do? Just give up and I become a vampire? Oliver sighed. There isn't anything I can do. Like I said, I did give you a choice who will sire you, either Draven or myself. Either Draven or I. Yeah, well, sounds alright. His word. Christopher didn't like the alternative. He didn't want to become Oliver's child either, especially knowing how he had lied to him his whole life. Trying to figure out how to logically get to wrapping up this scene here, because it's about everything I wanted it to have. Christopher didn't like the alternative. He didn't want to become Oliver's child either, especially knowing how he had lied to him his whole life. I want you out of this house, out of my life. I want no part in this vampire business. just seeing how I want to finish this conversation, or this paragraph here. Alright, so I think this is going to be how I end the scene. Oliver stood up. I understand this is a lot to take in. I'll leave for now. But you can't ignore this. You must make a choice. What I did was out of love for you. I couldn't stop him, but I was able to make this compromise. He won't wait for your choice. He won't wait long for your choice. If you choose me, I will at least let you live for another 10 or 20 years as a human. You'll have to decide soon. At that, Oliver walked out of the living room and out of the house, leaving Christopher with the unenviable task of having to choose. So yeah, there we go. Finished the first scene. I'm curious how many words we did. Uh, 1,200, not as many as I would have liked for today. I say that because we are coming to the end. It is 1:40, and if I got into the next scene, I would not be done by 2, and I have people coming over after this, so I have to get ready for them to get here and take a shower and stuff like that. So I couldn't go past 2 o'clock this week, but I will update the Google Doc so you can read this at your own leisure. It'll be linked in the VOD that I linked to my bail note, or that I post on YouTube. If you're and if you're already on YouTube, go ahead and look in the description and you can get a link to the story in a Google Doc. The next time I will not edit the whole entire document. I'll just go over the last scene, edit that, and then move into the next scene, which will be which I haven't outlined yet, but I have been thinking about. It'll be a confrontation with him and his parents when they get home from the lake the next day. So we're at 16 pages so far, and we're sort of coming to a close. He's going to have to make his choice soon. So I'm not exactly sure how many scenes until the end, but I'm guessing we have another 5 to 10 pages before the story is finished. I'd like to thank everyone for joining me, and again a special shout out to Oswald for his 3rd month in a row for subscribing. I really appreciate that a lot, and I hope to see all of you again next week.